The great Moses Maimonides
wrote in the laws of mourning, one should not indulge in excessive grief over one's dead, for that is the way of the world. And one who frets over the way of the world is a fool. And then his younger brother David died. Moses Maimonides was sure, intellectually, philosophically, he knew that it was foolish to resist the world's normal course, but for all his intellectual prowess, Maimonides was humbled by life. His stoic disdain for emotion collapsed in the face of loss. For almost a year after receiving the sad news, he wrote in a letter to Japhet the judge, quote, I lay on my couch stricken with fever, despair, and on the brink of destruction. Close to 8 years have now elapsed, and I still mourn for him, for there can be no consolation. What can possibly comfort me? He grew up on my knees. He was my brother, my pupil. My greatest joy was to see him. Now every joy has been dimmed. The title of today's sermon is The Exile of Sadness. I chose that title because there is a sickness which afflicts modern Jewish communities, surely not only Jewish communities, but we are not immune. We exile sadness. Time after time after time, people sit with me in my office, they stand with me at the cemetery, and when they start to cry, they apologize. As if tears are a turpitude and sadness a sin. These apologies are a symptom of an emotional illness that plagues our society. Emotional health is the ability to rejoice in happy times like a wedding or a bar mitzvah, or when a baby is born, or just sitting around the table at a Shabbat dinner with friends and feeling gratitude for the precious moments we can be together. And emotional health is to feel sadness when someone dies or is sick, or when our marriage is ending, or when we are estranged from those we love. But we apologize for our tears. A midrash describes God as crying as the temple is destroyed. The angel Metatron pleads with God, let me cry instead. And God responds, if you do not leave me to cry now, I will enter the place where you cannot enter, and I will cry. Metatron is ashamed of God crying, but God is not. God's tears do not diminish the divine image, they uplift it. As Moses is making his way down the mountain, looking at the people dancing around the golden calf, the Israeli author David Sneh writes in his book, sometimes Moses was just sad. He was just sad. And he had nobody to tell. And it wasn't even written in the Torah. Sneh writes about it in his book because if it wasn't in the written Torah we have received, it deserves to be in our Torah. We need to know that Moses Maimonides and Moses, our teacher, sometimes just felt sad. And we need to be able to talk about it. Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka are top athletes who helped create in this past year, more acceptance and understanding of the fact that mental illness and health are real things. It took courage for them to use the words depression and anxiety and to prioritize their own well-being, to prioritize their well-being over Olympic medals and tennis tournaments. Their vulnerability has shrunk the stigma and led more people to getting help. In our own congregation, our beloved Dr. Charlie Vanderhorst of blessed memory wrote about his experiences in a January 2018 newspaper article. Quote, underlying the anger, anxiety, frustration, and grandiosity was depression, hopelessness, and helplessness. I self-medicated in good ways and bad by working out daily, swimming and running. I kept my pulse up and endorphins flowing, albeit temporarily. Drinking more than 2 glasses of wine and known depressant each night with dinner became a regular habit, exacerbating my symptoms. Tears came easily, as is often the case for professionals. I kept silent about my thoughts. That and my constant joking kept others at bay and unaware as I continued to feel helpless, trapped in my job and not seeing a way out. My thoughts turned from occasional suicidal ideation to making concrete plans. At first, I stopped wearing a seatbelt, then my mind began drifting to taking the elevator to the 6th floor of the hospital and jumping to the plaza below. An estimated 300 to 400 physicians die by suicide in the US each year, he wrote. A higher rate than the general population for both males and females. Somehow I avoided joining that number. In my rearview mirror, thinking of my daughters helped me to look up and begin the move away from my inner torment. I told my wife and close friends and sought help. In my own bulletin article a few weeks ago, I wrote about how a few years ago I was diagnosed with depression. With the help of medicines and therapy and family and friends, I am able to manage it. Depression and anxiety are sometimes manageable, but sometimes they are totally debilitating. Rabbi Julie Adler was once a student of mine. Now she is my colleague and friend and teacher. In a sermon she gave many years ago, Rabbi Adler compared depression to the plague of darkness. We read in the Torah, a thick darkness descended upon Egypt, so thick that for 3 days no one could get up from where they were. I have spoken to people in our community who suffer this way, who for weeks or months at a time struggle just to move or to be concerned with anything outside in the world. In his book, The Noonday Demon, an Atlas of Depression, Andrew Solomon writes, mild depression is a gradual and sometimes permanent thing that undermines people the way that rust weakens iron. It is too much grief at too slight a cause, a pain that takes over from the other emotions and crowds them out. While at the worst stages of depression, I knew that the sun was rising and setting, but little of its light reached me. I felt myself sagging under what was much stronger than I. First, I could not use my ankles, and then I could not control my knees, and then my waist began to break under the strain, and then my shoulders turned in, and in the end, I was compacted and fetal, depleted by the thing that was crushing me without holding me. The plague of darkness ended in 3 days. But that darkness is still here. It plagues millions of Americans each year. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, 51.5 million Americans experienced mental illness in 2019. 13.1 million people, or 1 in 20 adults, experienced serious mental illness, and suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34, with LGBTQ teens and military veterans being disproportionately affected. And the pandemic has only made things worse. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, 4 in 10 adults in the US, 4 in 10, have reported symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder, a share that has been largely consistent, up from 1 in 10 adults who reported these symptoms from January to June of 2019. Depression and anxiety rates rise during a pandemic because, according to the biopsychosocial model, depression and anxiety have 3 types of cause: biological, psychological, and social. And our community and society have suffered a huge and traumatic social cause, a year and more of severe isolation and disconnection from human contact. In my bulletin article, with the help of Dr. Harold Cudler, I included some resources and strategies for each of us to be aware of, both for ourselves and to support the people we love. But today, I want to think more broadly with you about the inclusion of people struggling with mental illness in our community. One of the many reasons that I treasure Bethel so much is for the way that we strive to be radically inclusive. It is the rare synagogue that houses an Orthodox minyan, an egalitarian minyan, a Chavurah minyan, a traditional egalitarian minyan, a synagogue that welcomes Jews of color, LGBTQ Jews, intermarried Jews, and many non-Jews who are fellow travelers, spiritual seekers who are at home in other traditions but enjoy the spiritual richness of Judaism. Did you know that on Wednesday morning, and I think I saw him on the Zoom earlier today, that on Wednesday morning, there is a Mormon theologian who joins our class on the Exodus and who periodically publishes articles in online Mormon magazines about what Judaism can teach Mormons about studying the Bible and observing Shabbat. It is time for our inclusivity, to extend also to those who suffer from depression and anxiety and other kinds of mental illness, not only because it's something that we can do for those who suffer, but because our Torah is diminished and our community is incomplete if we have exiled sadness from our midst. What might this look like? The Talmud in Masechet Smachot imagines the temple in its fullness. Most people bring offerings by entering and going around to the right, but not everyone. This is what the text says. These people should go round to the left. A mourner, an excommunicated person, one who has a sick person in his house, one who's lost an object. When asked, why do you go around to the left? That one answers, because I'm a mourner. And they reply, may the one who dwells in this house comfort you. And if she says, because I'm under a ban, they reply, may the one who dwells in this house put it in your heart to hearken to the words of the sages so they may draw you near. To the one who has a sick person at home, they say, may the one who dwells in this house have mercy upon your loved one. And if the person at home is severely ill, they say, may God have mercy immediately. And finally, the text includes a story. The story is told of a certain woman whose daughter was ill, and she ascended the Temple Mount and went round to the left and did not move from there until they came and told her she is cured. And to one who lost some object, they say, may the one who dwells in this house put it into the heart of the finder to return it to you at once. And again, another story of Eleazar, the son of Hananiah, the son of Hezekiah, the son of Gorion, that he lost a scroll of the Torah. Oy. He lost a scroll of the Torah, which he had bought for 100 minas. I don't know what a minas is, but it sounds expensive. He ascended the Temple Mount, went round it, and did not move from there until they came and told him the scroll of the Torah has been found. This is an extraordinary text that we can spend a lot of time thinking and learning about. For today, I want to point out a few important things. First, notice the balance. On the one hand, the temple as a communal spiritual space is built physically and ritually with lanes that had to move in two directions. For some people to go to the right and for some people to go to the left. We must build our community in such a way that destigmatizes those who are struggling, who need to be present but cannot be present in the same way as others can. And on the other hand, those who are in need are not only victims. They have agency and they have an obligation to identify themselves, to courageously make themselves vulnerable by letting people see, I am in mourning. Someone in my home is sick. I have lost something, or in our case, I am struggling with depression. I am not okay. In preparation for this sermon, I reached out to several people in our community who struggle with depression and mental illness and asked them, what's important for you? What is it important for the community to know about their struggles? And one person said to me, I needed to actually learn the importance of asking for help. I needed to really internalize that it is a mitzvah to give others the opportunity to perform a mitzvah for me. I needed to model that vulnerability and to normalize those requests. Too often, we feel like we're being a burden if we reach out, but I know now how our community appreciates the opportunity to support me and to support others. Mental illness is an illness, and some levels of care must be left to medical professionals with the capacity to provide appropriate support, but there is also a lot we can do for each other. And too often, if someone breaks a leg or has a cancer diagnosis, we cook and we offer rides and we reach out, but when it comes to mental illness, we fall short. Those struggling must walk around to the left, must identify themselves and what needs they have that can be appropriately filled by the community, and the community must meet each person with a blessing. Second, notice that the response to each of this person is not necessarily to do something. In the case of the text, it's to offer a blessing. We have an amazing community of care who selflessly provide practical support to so many people in need, and I cannot sing their praises enough. And this text serves as an important reminder that we should not only react to someone else's pain by trying to fix things. For those of you who like internet videos, go ahead and to YouTube and look up a video. The title is "It's Not About the Nail." It's a fun video that pokes fun about someone whose head hurt and keeps saying to her partner, I need you to just listen to me, when it turns out that she actually has a nail in her head. But the video contains a really important message, which is that too often we try to fix what can't be fixed. And in doing so, we leave the person in front of us feeling unacknowledged, because we are uncomfortable sitting with the sadness of someone we care about. We react to an admission of depression with phrases like, can you just think about something else? Or don't you realize how good you have it? Or at least this other horrible thing isn't happening to you. We try to remind people who are depressed of what they have, trying to help them forget their pain. And yet, by invalidating their pain, we add shame, a secondary emotion to the feelings already present. So they end up feeling terrible for feeling terrible. By invalidating their sadness, the people we want to help end up feeling blamed for their problems when what they need the most is just to feel heard, is just for us to be with them, for us to witness their pain. Too often, blessings risk devolving into meaningless and even hurtful theological platitudes, but when spoken face to face, from the heart in the context of authentic relationships, offering someone words of blessing can be a powerful tool precisely because it's not practical. It just says, I see you. I care. My heart hurts seeing how things are hard for you. I want to do whatever I can practically to help, but I also acknowledge there's a piece of this that I can't fix. I feel helpless, and maybe with your permission, I just want to offer prayer. That the one who's the source of all healing brings some healing and some light into your heart. Finally, I am very taken with the stories in that text. The ones about the woman whose daughter is ill and the man who lost the Torah, both of whom say, I am not moving from here. I can imagine someone on the staff of the temple in Jerusalem who thinks it's his job to tell the woman with the sick child and the man who lost the Torah, you can't stay here, it's closing time, it's time to go now. But these people refuse. And in their refusal, they remind us all that that's what that place and this place are for. Jennifer and the boys and I arrived in Durham from Israel on July 4th, 2011. One day in mid-August, I was rushing from the synagogue to my car in the parking lot when Becca Resnick stopped me. Rabbi Greyber, do you have a moment? I was really in a hurry, though I don't remember now where I was rushing off to. I was feeling the stress of getting our boys settled into a new home, feeling insecure about how to be a synagogue rabbi, feeling tired from going to meeting after meeting, trying to get to know a community who all knew my name, but I didn't know very many of theirs. And I thank God to this very day that something moved me in that moment to stop and put down my bag and look her in the eyes and say, sure, what's going on? I don't remember now what exactly we talked about. But I do remember when Becca took her life a few weeks later, after years of struggling with mental illness, how at the Shiva house, Becca's mom, Jackie, told me how grateful Becca was for that short interaction, that she had felt seen and acknowledged and heard in that moment. There are others besides Becca whose lives have been taken by depression and anxiety and other illnesses of the mind, who are buried in our cemetery, and still others in our community whose family members have lost their loves to mental illness and are buried elsewhere. And there is still much we can do to support people, both those who struggle with mental illness and their families and their friends. September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and we should all learn that if we are worried about someone, the importance of reaching out and initiating contact, of asking someone directly if they are thinking of hurting themselves. We should learn about the importance of listening without judgment and of connecting them to resources that can help, and doing these things can save a life. And in the words of the rabbis, can save a world. Becca's family shared with me how so many people in our congregation, through small kindnesses and presence and acknowledgement, didn't fix what couldn't be fixed, but they helped keep Becca in the world for so long and were for her a source of blessing and light. And in turn, Becca herself was instrumental in keeping other people in the world. She understood the depths of depression, and through her own self-understanding, she was able to validate the experience and meaning of others afflicted with this terrible disease. Through sadness, Becca and others reveal to us a Torah of kindness. And our Torah is incomplete without it. The Palestinian poet Naomi Shihab Nye once wrote, "Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore." The mother whose daughter is ill, the man who lost a Sefer Torah, the people in these stories who refuse to leave are reminding us that holy places like the temple in Jerusalem and this synagogue in our community, these are the places where we go when we are hurting the most. That places that aren't governed by opening and closing hours, the places where we have access to healing and to finding ourselves again and the things that we've lost. Today is Yom Kippur. It's not a day to dress up. It's not a day to put on airs. It's a day for us to come as we are in all our brokenness. If we are to make space for others who are struggling with illness and sadness, we must acknowledge and make peace with the brokenness that is in each of us. Over and over again, we stand in community and we declare Ashamnu, Bagadnu, all variations on a theme of we are broken and we are guilty. We are not perfect. And in making space with what is broken within us, then maybe, just maybe, we can prepare our souls to do this for others. Today is a day of God's forgiveness. The day itself atones, the rabbis say, washes over us with love. Of course, we have to do the work of asking for forgiveness from others for the wrongs that we've done to them. But instead of seeing Yom Kippur as an end of 10 days of repentance, perhaps we should see it as a beginning. Perhaps that being reminded today that God's love and forgiveness is not offered to those who are perfect and whole, but to we who are flawed and broken. Then we can best forgive others who are broken too. Those characters in the stories are reminding us here is where we can come to spend the night crying for healing, where we can continue to hope to find that which is most precious to us to be found and to be seen. And if tomorrow our daughter doesn't get better and we ourselves become mourners, here is where we will know that there's a place for us to walk to the left and to be seen and known and loved and met with blessing. That, to me, is a vision of what Bethel can be in our best moments. And that's what we've inherited from those who came before us, from those who we will remember in the Yizkor service in just a minute. Moses in the desert pitches his tent outside the camp. That's where Moses' tent is outside the camp. The author, who I mentioned before, David Sneh, points out that outside the camp is also where people with illness live. And he wonders if Moses chooses to live there because he feels a kinship with them. He feels alone, and they too feel alone. And by choosing to live with those who are ill, Moses makes it so that they are really not outside of the camp anymore. Moses expands the boundaries of the camp, and they are included. And through this inclusion, the community becomes whole once again. So it was then. So may it be for us. It's time to broaden our tent again, to make space for sadness and tears in our midst. My God, if we can't cry at the cemetery or in synagogue, where, oh, where shall we cry? It's time for those who struggle with depression and anxiety and mental illness to know that we see you. We want to bless you. And we want the Torah of kindness that only you can teach us through your sorrow. And most of all, we want you to know that we are not whole unless you are with us as you are. Shana Tova.